Hi, I'm Adria, Beth's daughter. Most of you know that, some of you may not. This is my husband, Jim Skaggs. And we are here tonight with Mom. We're going to be celebrating her life so that the wonderful things that happened to her are not lost. And her posterity can always know who she was and what she did. So I have a question for you, Mom. And it's about music, of course, one of my favorite things and one of yours. And I know that you have received standing ovations in your performances. And there's 3 of them that I remember that I wondered if you would just tell us about. One is what happened here in Wyoming, the Patriotic. And another was Rhapsody in Blue. And the other one I know you have told me about was with Carol E. Gill.
Well, all right, let's see. I'll start with the first one you mentioned. This was really, really a beautiful thing. In Wyoming, they celebrate Veterans Day. They're very patriotic here in Wyoming. And the schools celebrate it beautifully in a way I've never seen yet in my life. So a lady who had charge of it was the head of the schools in Manderson, asked me if I would play some patriotic numbers. And she had 4 numbers she wanted. And I said, well, yes, would you like me to play them while they sing or something? No, I want you to play a piano solo. Well, I was used to arranging my own piano work, and it was kind of hard. And it had been a while, and I was not quite as young as I wished I was. But I said yes, and I worked on those 4 numbers, and till I had done them the best I could. Went that day to play. I was on the piano out in that great big hall with the bleachers on each side, and the school children were released from school, from the 5th graders on up, and there was a big crowd there and quite a few veterans, and it scared me. And when she announced me that I would play, she had asked me to play these particular 4 numbers, and they were beautiful and very, very emotional type numbers. And she said, Sister Eason has been a very patriotic person all of her 90 years. And that tells you that I was 90. And I was still playing. So I came out and played those numbers, and as beautifully as I possibly could. And when I got up and turned around, everybody was clapping, and they were all standing. And I thought, what are they standing for? And suddenly I knew it was me. And of course, because I was 90, it wouldn't be hard to get a standing ovation for as hard as I'd worked. But I was so embarrassed. I was very shy, and I ducked my head, waved my hand, and rushed to my seat and sat down. But that was really a thrill. I couldn't believe that at 90 years old, I would be able to get a standing ovation. But they were a wonderful audience, and I appreciated that. But that was my last. That's the last standing ovation. Now with Carol E. Carol E. was a concert pianist in our ward, and she taught my children piano because I wasn't a very good teacher. I didn't like to teach my own children. And we were having a big ward reunion. In those days, our ward reunions in Whittier Ward were great, huge, wonderful reunions. And he asked Carol E. if she would play this 2-piano concerto with me at the organ playing the second piano, which was pretty difficult. Organ and piano music don't blend that well. And so she asked me if I would, and I, in a weak moment, said yes. So I worked hard on the organ and tried to make it sort of an orchestra type thing. And when her teacher heard her play it, she approved it, so we played it. And she got a standing ovation, and of course had me stand with her, so I got it too. and another time when Adria and Mickey were dancing to Rhapsody in Blue, I was playing for them to dance, and they were in a dance recital here with their teacher, and they did a gorgeous, beautiful dance to that wonderful music, Rhapsody in Blue, and we all got a standing ovation for that. Standing ovation is quite a thrill, and so it was a neat experience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Your turn.
Well, Beth, I kind of want to know. Oh, it's not going to be that bad. I really want to know what made you realize that George was the one for you.
Oh, that's a deep question, Kim. But I knew I met him on a blind date. I didn't go on blind dates, but this time there I was for some reason. My sisters got it for me. They knew this man who just recently come home from a mission and was teaching violin music there in Lehigh. And so I was going home for the weekend to spend it with my parents. I worked in Salt Lake, and they asked me if I would come to a party as his partner. So I did. And believe me, I met my hero. It didn't take me long to know. I was already close to being married to Carl, but that ended that night. And the next day we had a date, and that was in January. In April, he took me up to the temple ground and proposed to me. And we stood in front of the big temple doors, and he asked me if I would marry him, and he said, there is just one thing that I would never give up for you. And I thought, well, how on earth is it he wants me to marry him, and there's something he wouldn't give up? And I said, okay, what is it? And he said, that would be my priesthood. Immediately, I knew that he was the one. He had every quality that I had ever wanted, and in 2 months we were married. On the 16th of June in the temple, and when we came out of the temple, it was snowing on us. June 16th, but that was our wedding. And he was a wonderful husband, a wonderful man. That was it.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I am so excited about this project. I really am. It's just going to be a priceless thing when it's done. Thank you, Jackie, for a great idea. And I can't wait to see the finished product. I love you all. Thanks.
We love you. Goodbye.
I'm Sterling Chavis, Beth Eason's grandson. We just saw my family. We're here to ask her a few questions, kind of get her life on tape, so we can reflect back on it and enjoy the times and the wisdom that she has to offer.
Introduce your family.
We'll start with the oldest, Crystal over there. Say hi.
Hi.
And David, is the next oldest.
Hi.
And there's Jared.
Oh yeah, there he is.
Yeah, and then there's Adriana.
Hi.
Little camera buff over there. And then there's
Hi.
Sterling James.
And your wife?
And my wife, my beautiful wife Marie. I'll go first with the question. I've always been a technology buff. A lot of people know that probably already. I'm just interested in Grandma's take in her century on how technology has affected society and her, and if it's been more of a benefit or a detriment, or both. Just kind of get her take on the way it's progressed throughout her life.
Well, Sterling, that's a really super neat question. I might have known you'd think up one night. When I think about it, I have a hard time believing that I have seen as much of life as I have. I was born 92 and a half years ago, and that's a long, long time. There are so many changes. I don't know quite how to start telling you, but I'll tell you one thing. In technology, now everybody knows about the computer. We're not going to talk a lot about that because as Sterling told me, that's a known thing and everyone has followed the story of the computer and what it can do and how it has changed. But I've been thinking about, for instance, first of all, communications. We didn't even have a telephone and things like that, and the telephone up, and now look what we have now, cell phones. You can phone while you're in your car, you can phone from anywhere, you can put it on so that the whole family can hear the phones and everything, and that communication thing has really done a lot. And you can carry things around the world. Now when our general conferences come for the church, they have their own satellite system which can pick up other satellite systems, and the church, people can hear the church talks all around the world because of the wonderful situation. And when I was little, I was 12 years old before I got to go to even see one. I went with my father when he was bishop for the tabernacle. And that was about my first time I ever got to go and see the big crowd that was there to hear this conference. And only the people that were there got to hear it, not anybody else. And now you can hear it at any church all around the world. So that's a wonderful thing. And then the travel. When I was little, guess how I traveled? Guess how we went from Lehigh to American Fork the first time I remember. I bet you can't get it. Oh, Phoebe, maybe you can get it.
Horse and buggy.
Absolutely. We had a horse, two horses, and a two-seated buggy, and our family could get in that. And that's the way, and my dad couldn't afford a car until I was about 6 or 7 or 8 years old. I don't remember. And then we got one of the early cars. David, I bet you and Jared can remember pictures of the first old cars that we got. And now, what can we do? I went to Hawaii on a plane and got there in a few hours and in one day, and had a wonderful trip, and came back. And we used to have to go across the water in boats. It took weeks sometimes. So
Because
the
the
trip
goes
was-
with the paddles?
Oh, sometimes, yeah. And so there's been so much happening that it's just amazing what I have seen in my lifetime. And we've even gone to the moon. Can you believe it?
The moon?
We've even gone to the moon, some men have.
Moon?
And You know, we can't get there yet, but some people do. Make trips to the moon because they figured out how to build a kind of a, yeah. What do you call them? You guys used to,
Space shuttles.
First, and then,
rocket,
and then the space shuttle came later.
the spaceships that you guys used to draw. And, so there's a lot happened. There's so much happened that it just amazes me, and it's been very interesting. Now, I need to not take too much time, so I'll get to whether it's been a detriment or not. There are wonderful things. In medicine, wonderful things have happened. We used to call every illness we had by 2 or 3 names, the ague or some typhoid fever or something else, and we'd put a mustard plaster on our chest, and that'd about be it. And everything that we had. And when we'd have to take medicine, they'd give us castor oil, and that was supposed to cure about everything we had. Now they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pills and different things that cure us and help us, and hundreds of different kind of sicknesses. So that's all something. So those things are very, very wonderful for us. But also, in other ways, it has been detrimental. There is the good that you can do with all these great things that we have, but there's also bad that you can do, isn't there?
Yep.
You can see terrible things on television, bad things that are not good for you to even look at. You can partake of lots of things, there's lots of bad in the world. In other words, Heavenly Father can do so many things with all this stuff, but you have to remember that there's an adversary who is Satan. He knows about these things too, and he knows how to use them. So we have to make our choices and be careful and be sure that we're doing the right thing, because the wrong thing don't ever work very good. So why bother with it? Always try to choose the right thing. Okay? And I love this family. I'm happy to be here. And thanks, Debbie, for your
And I love you.
Some very wise words there.
Oh,
It's all about the choice.
you bet. You bet.
Technology has done so many wonderful things, and it's enabled so many terrible things. So it's all about choice. And I just
Absolutely.
hope we can all continue making the right choices.
Well, I think you're all
Ain't
on
that
your
right,
way.
guys?
And
Huh?
you're all learning and you're all being
Yeah.
taught, aren't you? All the time.
Yes. And I wish I could go
Oh,
to
no.
such.
Okay.
David.
You're going to.
Okay, next question we got
Look what I
is
did
from the kids,
to my shoe.
and we're gonna let David ask that one.
Who are your great grandparents?
Oh, you're interested in that. Because you have a great grandparent alive, huh? You want to know who mine were? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about some of them. My great grandpa Anderson came from Denmark, and when I was a tiny little girl, he was still alive. And I used to take a quart of milk to him every day. He lived a block away from us, and I was a little girl, littler than you, more like her. And I was so careful, and I was so fussy. I could take that milk down to him every morning and not spill a bit, and he called me Old Faithful. And
What?
and he lived until I was about 6 years old, and he'd say, "Here comes Old Faithful again." Then he'd take me on his lap and give me a hug. And that was the very beginning of that one. And he came from Denmark, he and his mother, and they had quite a lot of money. And when they came here to Utah, why, he sponsored quite a few people who wanted to come to Utah and make their home in Utah for the church or for other reasons. And by sponsoring, I mean he paid their way and helped them get work when they came here, so he was a good man. Now, I have another great one that I can tell you about on my mother's side. His name was Beck, and that was his last name. And the funny thing about him, the interesting thing was, he had a set of double teeth, all double teeth, no single tooth. Every tooth in his mouth was double teeth, like your backwards. You know which is your double teeth. Okay? And they were so strong. They were small. They weren't great big, but they were so strong he could bite nails into. And he was known that he could bite nails into with these double teeth. And that ran in the family. A relative of his went up had the same thing, so that was just occasional. Only 2 or 3 people that I heard of that could do that. And so that was wonderful. And he was a carpenter, so carpenters make things and build things with nails, and he could do good things. Now they're the ones I know of that I remember hearing a lot of nice things about. And he was very good. And he married my grandmother's mother, and she was a Whipple. And the Whipples were royalty. We were told recently they were royalties, and they were called Von Hippels in the beginning, and then they changed it to Whipple, easier to say, I guess. And they're your relatives. Now see, they're your ancestors. And they were kings and that all down, many of them. And they were mostly in Europe and places like that. And we have on paper some of them. I can show you someday some of their names. King James the First and King James the Second, or things like that. That was interesting. And a lot of people had the same thing. You can trace their ancestors to kings and that of other countries, because they came to live here eventually, and that's what I know about them. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thanks for asking that question.
It's interesting.
It's a bad
Okay. I think Crystal has a question for Grandma now.
Okay.
Okay, what has music done for you on a personal level throughout your life?
Music has almost been my life, per se. This is something that I can tell you, and I think you'll understand because you're a musician yourself. You sing it. And I could go to the piano, and in my mind, I thought I could make that piano talk. For me, if I was sad, I could find something to play that would brighten me up. If I played I played a beautiful waltz when I was younger, about Viennese waltz or something like that. That could take me right to the end. I could dream when I was there, and on the water in a boat, I could see pictures. It's an emotional thing with you that you can do. And I have played for you to sing, and I have heard you start to find that expression in the music that you can sing with your heart and not just with your head. And it will do much, much for you in your life, because you will have lots of sad times and lots of wonderful times, and you will express it in music. Thank you for that question. That's my great love.
Okay, everybody can say goodbye.
Bye.
Say we love you,
We all love you, Grandma.
Bye. 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 Bye.
of, she's my mom's mother on that side, and she has a question for Brother Eason.
Hi, Beth. I was just curious, when did you first start playing the piano? What age?
That's a fun question to answer because my neighbor let me come in and play her piano once because I was standing with my nose against the swing door looking at it while the other kids were playing. And I went in there and I knew I could play that piano. And I picked out the tune to My Country 'Tis a Thee. And one or two other little songs I knew, and she told my dad I needed to learn. So, we didn't have much money, we were all poor like everyone. But a little bit later, my dad came home from Salt Lake City with a big truck full of it, and it was a piano. And it thrilled me to death. And this woman had told me I had that one, but I was the youngest of the family. So, when we got our piano, my two sisters had first chance at lessons. We were fairly interested, but they were a little older and a little embarrassed to play the little sixteen. So, but anyway, I remember running home from school to beat them to the piano, and then I would learn their numbers, their songs. My aunt was a piano teacher, so my father's family was musical, so they had a piano there. And I was 8 years old at that time. And by the time I got lessons, I was 9. But I spent a lot of time at the piano. And the thing they always used to say was we never did have to ask Beth to practice the piano, but we'd have to ask her to stop. So the family were awfully nice to me about it, and they supported me. And I played from then on. I didn't get to take lessons steadily, but nothing on life. And I've left it all my life, and I still play a few things. I still accompany in church sometimes, and a few things, and it's helped me give a lot of service by accompanying people.
It's a pleasure to listen to you play.
Oh, thank you so much. I love it. I wish I could still do it. I like that question. Thank you. Thank you.
Go.
Hi, Grandma. This is the Chavis family. Here to ask you a couple questions. I guess first, I think you know us all, but there's Adam over there.
I'm
Say hi.
Josh.
It's Josh. This is Tommy. Say hi, Grandma. And this is Adeline.
Say hi, Grandma.
Okay. And there's Katie over there. Casey.
Say hi, Grandma.
Say hi, Grandma. Over there in the camera.
Say hi.
Say hi, Grandma. In the camera.
Now she's shy.
Well, now she
Yeah.
won't talk, but anyway.
Hi, Grandma.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask a couple questions. First one would be, what would you consider to be one of the more trying times of your life? Something that was difficult to work your way through, just something that sticks out in your head. And the number 2 question would be, what would you consider to be a great achievement of yours? Again, just the first thing that kind of comes into your mind, something that sticks out, something that you're personally proud of. And I guess that's about it.
Anybody want to say anything else?
Anybody else want to say anything? Say hi, Grandma. We love you.
Hi, Grandma. We love you.
Anthony, your first question was, what would you consider to be a trying time in your life? A difficult time that stands out to you? And I did have a bad time in my life when I had to quit everything that I loved to do. And I was 44 years old at the time. Our house had caught on fire, and that might have triggered the beginning of the breakdown, but I did have a physical breakdown with my heart, went to pieces, and I wasn't supposed to live through it, and for the next 15 years, I never sat at the piano, and at the end of the 15th year, I was just barely getting out so I could get out of the car and walk into a store and sit down or something. And my heart, in the meantime, was just kind of flopping around. They gave me the strongest medicine they could, and it didn't help very much. And I found myself pretty much bedridden for the whole time, because when I would try to get up and move around, I would be dizzy, and sometimes I would have to quickly sit down right on the floor before I could get to the bed or something. And those were very, very difficult, hard years. But I learned a lot of things at that time, because I faced myself, I faced things inside me that I thought. I faced a lot of things, and I want to admit now that I felt like I brought this on myself because I worked too hard. I would run instead of walk. I had to challenge myself with everything. I had to beat myself at typing, at the adding machines and other machines at my work. I had to dress better than other people, and my children better than other people, to make myself half as good as those people. I wondered how I ever got on this earth, and how I ever managed to have a family or get married or anything. I had a bad time, and I felt like I brought this on myself. But I learned a lot, and since I have come out of that and been able to play again and give some service, never as hard and as good as I did in the beginning. Oh, and I played the marimba for 25 years, and that was another thing that broke my heart down. I could tell you have to use very, very heavy muscles for that. And I loved that instrument like a child, and I played it often. Most of the time it seems like 2 or 3 times a week. And that was a wonderful thing in my life, but I believe it helped me to have this illness. But the good Lord was good to me and helped me to get back into music, which I love so much, and to give service from then on. And I am still giving service at 92 years old. I can still substitute in church, and I still accompany people sometimes. So I did it by forcing myself to try to get better. I did it by forcing my lungs to be able to breathe on the machines the doctor sent home and things like that. And it took years, not days or months, but years to get better. And that was the bad time. Sorry I had to even tell it, because I would rather forget it. But I was blessed. I was greatly blessed by prayers. All right, now I'll go to the next question. What would be one of my greatest achievements, something that I was proud of? I've tried hard to figure out what I might have achieved. What was that one? Let's see. When I was young, I got to go I went to Henninger Business College, and the school took me along with 3 other students back to compete in the international typing contest to Chicago at the World's Fair that year, in the year 1934. I think it was 4 or 5. I'm certain it was 4. And I was just fresh from getting out of college. We came in this huge building. There were, they said, over 450 students competing on that floor in that building, and I was one who would always be frightened to death, never did anything as well under pressure or for anyone else to see that I did alone, but I won 3rd place in that out of 450 people in speed, and that was very exciting. What's the next one? Quick.
Family? Family?
My next greatest achievement, I tried to think of something, well, all right, it's family, my family. I feel like my family are wonderful, and they're wonderful to me in spite of me, not because of me. Because I didn't feel like the world's best mother, but, I did love my family, and they knew I loved them from day one. And that was the best way I could handle my children, was just to let them know that I loved them. That is probably the greatest thing that any of us can have, is have your children grow up and love you and treat you as good as they do now. Now that I need them, they're here. And I thank them for that, and thank you, Anthony, for asking those good questions. And I've just thought of another thing that I have to tell you about. All my life, I wanted to play that tabernacle organ. The first time I ever saw it, my dad was a bishop, and he took me to Salt Lake to conference with him. It was difficult for us in those early days. I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and I remember sitting by my dad and thinking, I just wanted to touch that organ. Just to be able to touch that organ was everything. I waited until I was 88 years old, and I had a chance to go play that organ. And I played that tabernacle organ. It was glorious. And then they took me over to the new convention center and let me play that organ, because now that was where they were holding their conferences and that. And here I sat down on the stage with that organ and those beautiful pipes up above me. And believe me, that was a glorious experience. And so that was a great achievement for me to be able to get to do that. Okay, now I am through for sure.